Our Fight UK is a group of mostly non-Jews who formed in the wake of the 7th of October atrocities to combat anti-Semitism. And they held a peaceful counter-protest last weekend, which was shut down by police, who said they were being provocative by saying Hamas are terrorists. Now, apparently, the police refused to let them move on until the pro-Palestine march had finished. Mark Burbeck is from Our Fight UK, and he joins me now. Welcome to the show, Mark. Now, I would like some clarity on that, because it sounds kind of astonishing. The official government position on Hamas is that they are a terrorist body. So why would the police have a problem with you referring to them as such?
Yeah, this is an ongoing thing, actually. I don't know if you've probably seen a good friend of mine, Nihat Ghobani, the Iranian activist who's become famous for showing the Hamas are terrorist posters and constantly getting in trouble with the police, being arrested, a number of articles in the Telegraph about him, bail conditions being set that are onerous and that kind of thing. So it does seem to be a problem that they have.
Well, what's the justification there? Because that's a statement of fact.
Exactly. Yeah.
So is the justification that the police are saying what? That this is needlessly provocative or likely to stir up some kind of violence?
Exactly. And what seems to be happening, although people are using the two-tier policing idea, what seems to be happening is that the larger the group is, the less likely they are to intervene. So what that means is if you have something like the Palestine Solidarity Campaign marching through the streets of London in their hundreds of thousands, then it becomes provocative to state the law. You know,
I understand.
You could say there's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, and then the police would say you're being provocative because there's more of them than there are of us.
So, I mean, just to play the other side, I mean, the police do have a job to do in terms of keeping the peace. If it is the case that they are under-resourced and could not possibly stop violence if the mob is large enough, do you have any sympathy with that perspective?
Well, I think I do to some extent. So I've been in situations where they've actually done a very good job. So myself and Nihat have done a couple of counter-protests. I did one on my own outside Downing Street in Whitehall, and there were about 10,000 people, and the police formed a ring around me.
Right.
And I was having things shouted at me, people ripped posters off me, but the police stayed there as long as I wanted to be there.
So they did protect your right to protest?
Yeah, so they are very clear on that as well.
Yeah.
They do know when you get talking to them that their job is to protect people's right to protest.
Yes. So that's positive.
That is.
But what happened specifically with this protest?
So, as you said, we were accused of being provocative, breaching the peace. They moved us back away, so we were above Temple Tube Station, which is quite a good view. The march was coming past. And people then got very, very angry, started shouting obscenities, at one point ripped an Israeli flag from somebody, which they tried to set on fire, ironic given the item you were discussing earlier about pride flags. And the police pushed us back so that we were not visible to the march, okay? They then said, though, so that's the first thing, which you've already mentioned, which is the breach of the peace idea. But then the second thing they said is that we shouldn't have actually been there.
Now, who said this to you? The officer in question?
Exactly, yeah, the officer in question. The reason we shouldn't have been there is because there was another protest going on by a great campaigning group called Enough is Enough. And they're mainly Jewish group, you know. And they have different goals and different aims to us. We often join them because it's very lively, very loud. There's usually a party atmosphere, so they're great protests. But we need to do our own thing. Now, what the police said is that under Section 14, if you were part of the Enough is Enough protest, you couldn't go and protest somewhere else.
Okay.
So they then used Section 14 of the Public Order Act to say to us, we believe you are part of that protest, you must go back there. Right. So effectively, they're essentially saying that on any given day, there can only be one protest against the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which obviously is a nonsense.
Well, it is a nonsense, yeah. It sounds quite bureaucratic, and needlessly so, because we still have a right to peaceful protest in this country. Even if I want to do it as an individual, disconnected from any group, I shouldn't be disqualified simply because there's another group doing it.
Absolutely, and it's worse than that. You're quite right, but it means that there's only one message that can be said, so it's not just the actual activity where you say, oh, there's only one group of people. So the Enough is Enough group, for example, much as I love them, they want to have the marches banned.
Yes.
We don't.
Right.
So how can we have only one protest on any given day?
Yes.
Our protest is try and appeal to non-Jews to say it's time to stand up. And also what it does is by pushing the idea that there's one protest with this Jewish group, it effectively kind of says to people in this country that this is a struggle far away. It's an issue far away that you don't really need to pay that much attention to.
Yes.
Look at all these hundreds of thousands of people marching through the streets, and then there's these Jewish people because they're, maybe they've got family in Israel and all the rest of it. So it means there can only be one message, which is that it's something you don't really need to worry about. It's not your call.
OK, I see. Well, we did contact the Met Police for a statement, and they did get back to us. They've said a policing operation took place covering a march organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign and a counter-protest by Enough is Enough in central London. The Met recognises the cumulative impact that PSC protesters can have on Londoners, including on London's Jewish communities. The goal has been to protect the lawful right to protest while minimising the impact of these events. Police do not have the power to ban protest unless there is a risk of serious disorder. Everyone in London has a right to protest, and we will continue to balance that with every Londoner's right to go about their lives without fear of serious disruption. So this feeds in quite nicely into what you were saying, that they understand, the police do understand, that their job is to facilitate protest in many ways, so long as it is peaceful, so long as it's not encroaching on the rights of others. But you got in trouble, or you attracted attention because you were holding a particular kind of placard, is that right?
So we, it's back to your point that you made before, that we were just simply stating the truth. We're stating two things. We had placards that said Hamas are terrorists,
yes,
which seemed to cause a lot of consternation amongst the attendees of the march. Wanted to burn the Israeli flag, as I said before. And then we also had placards that were linking Manchester Arena to the Nova Festival attacks on 7/10.
So talk me through the logic there. You're talking about, obviously, the terrorist attack in the Manchester Arena, which the horrific attack that killed those children, and obviously the massacre, the pogrom on October the 7th. So what is the point you're trying to make through the placard? Well,
there's a number of things there. One of the key ideas is that it was a music festival.
Yes.
It was young people. And you're kind of saying, well, what kind of mindset, what kind of mentality is it that would go out there and attack and destroy and run rampage for a music festival in Israel, in southern Israel.
So irrespective of what your messaging behind it was, what's the justification for preventing you from displaying it? I mean, even if you presented something that was completely wrong, actually the case you make is perfectly legitimate, but even if it was completely wrong, why couldn't you put that placard
Well, this
up?
is where they get slippery, because what they do is they then say Section 14. So as your statement from the Met said, we policed the protest that was going on from Enough is Enough.
Yes.
And so their point is, well, hang on a minute, it doesn't matter what your message is, you should have been over there with what my friends from Enough is Enough would call the Jew pen, right? That's where you should have been. You should have been over there, keeping quiet, 20 metres back from the road,
right,
do what you're told, kind of thing.
OK.
And they didn't like the fact that we were much more in your face.
But it is difficult insofar as, we do live in a free society where we have to balance this idea of competing views. I would argue that we shouldn't be banning any protests at all.
I agree.
But a lot of people are getting sick of the fact that we have these protests every weekend in London where Jewish people don't feel safe to walk around. That is a problem, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly a problem that people don't feel safe, and it's certainly something that and a lot of people in the Enough is Enough campaign would just say, look, police, do your job.
Yeah.
But I think you're quite right that there's the issue of free speech. We need to be able to protest. But then there's also the issue that you need to see these people for what they are, because if these people don't speak for us, then we need to speak for ourselves. So if you take something like the Phoenix Cinema, your friend Josh will probably tell you all about how great that was, the Phoenix Cinema protest. A bunch of people tried to have the film banned. Now imagine what it takes to actually try and ban a film.
And this was a film about the Nova musical massacre.
Exactly. It's about the young people. It's about the story that led up to it. It's obviously videos of them enjoying themselves and dancing, and then, of course, the macabre kind of experience of the whole Nova, and they piece together.
Yes.
I mean, what kind of mind would it take to say, let's ban that film from being shown in Finchley, largely Jewish area, people with families and connections back home? What would it take? So the PSC organised a protest outside Phoenix Cinema. They put pressure on the cinema to not show the film.
Yeah.
The staff apparently refused to work. Mike Lee and Ken Loach stepped down. So what the mindset that it takes to kind of do this and so back to your point about should we ban protests? People tried to get the PSC counter-protest banned.
Right.
They didn't succeed, which is a good thing,
yes,
because thousands of local people then came out and saw them off, pushed them down the tube, push them down the tube. That sounds a bit, but they basically pushed the demonstration so that it had to leave the area.
Yes.
And that gave people a real feeling of strength and a feeling of success and solidarity, which wouldn't have happened if you'd had the bureaucratic banning of that particular event.
OK, very interesting. Well, finally, where can people find out about your organisation?
So we have a website, ourfight.uk. There's a mailing list there. We're on Twitter, X, ourfightuk. And then we're on Instagram, our_fight_UK.
Fantastic. Mark Birbeck, thanks very much for joining me.